much. You already are.
Thank you. I'd like to call to order the Milan Area Schools Board of Education regular meeting for Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice for all. Thank you for everyone attending this evening. I do want to let you know that Ms. Macchio is excused this evening, and also our student board member Avery Powell is also excused this evening. The first thing that we want to start with tonight is some board recognition. I need a motion to commend our 2022-2023 career technical education students for all their accomplishments this year.
So moved by Frey.
Second by Rosenleacher.
It's been moved and supported to commend our 2022-2023 career and technical education students for all their accomplishments this year. Are there any of those students here this evening? Come on down to the stage, please, guys. Come on down. Please come on down. Yep, come up to the stage, guys. Please. You guys made the effort to be here, so we want to recognize you. This was an idea that was presented by Ms. Freight. She had attended some other school board meetings within the WASB. So we're going to recognize them this evening. So if you guys could all just stand up here on the lit line, we have a resolution to read.
And actually what we're going to do first is have you give your name and what program you're involved in.
What program?
What's career tech ed program you're involved in?
Oh, I'm not in any.
Oh, you're not in career tech ed?
I'm not in that either.
Oh, you guys are.
Oh,
We just
oh,
decided to go.
I'm sorry, this is career, I'm sorry, I apologize.
That's
guys.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Welcome to the meeting, though.
I'm Mac, and I'm doing the nursing program.
I'm Ava Pastolka, and I'm in the video news production program.
Thank you both.
Awesome.
The resolution we're going to read for you guys.
All right, just stand up here for this resolution. Whereas career and technical education in Michigan prepares students at the secondary and post-secondary levels to have the academic, technical, and work behavior skills to enter, compete, and advance in education and their careers. And whereas career and technical education offers a diverse delivery system that provides students with leadership opportunities in various career fields, allowing for the rigorous and relevant application of workplace skills while incorporating reading, writing, and mathematics. And whereas career and technical education serves as a career and college-ready connection and is the foundation of a strong and well-educated workforce. And whereas career and technical education offers students opportunities to earn college credit, industry certification, and licenses in high-wage, high-skilled, and in-demand fields as aligned with Michigan's top 10 strategic education plan to expand secondary learning opportunities for all students and increase the percentage of adults with a post-secondary credential. And whereas career and technical education provides students with work-based learning experiences to provide Michigan with a highly skilled, sustainable workforce, which will help achieve the state's goal of reaching 60% post-secondary education attainment rate by 2030. And whereas, according to the Michigan Department of Education, career and technical education enrollment in Michigan rose by 3% in 2021-2022 compared to 2020-2021, with over 106,000 students enrolled in CTE and CTE-B program completers increasing by over 65% from 27,014 in 2014 to 15 to 44,609 in 2021 to 22. And whereas during this month, we joined with the Governor's Office, the Michigan Department of Education, the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, and the Michigan Association for Career and Technical Education to encourage youth and adults in Michigan to be ambassadors for career and technical education and to send the message that Michigan career and technical education students are prepared for the 21st century, high-wage, high-skilled, and in-demand jobs. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Milan Area Schools Board of Education commends our career and technical education students and staff, and we sincerely thank them for the honor and pride they bring to themselves, their school, and their community. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you for being here.
Thank you, guys. Thanks.
So I have a motion and a second to commend our 2022-2023 career tech and education students for all their accomplishments this year. Ms. Heike.
Murray,
Yes.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Freight,
Yes?
Heike. Oh, yes. Motion carries 6-0.
All right, thank you. Next up on the agenda is public comment, communications, community engagement, and just have something to read here. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public meeting. There are 2 times for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. When addressing the board, you will be asked to state your name. The board determines the amount of time granted to individuals or groups to speak. Each person shall be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes, and I ask you to finish your thought when the timer goes off. Board members may question speakers but are not obligated to answer questions or make statements or commitments in response to issues raised by the public. In general, such items will be referred to the superintendent for advisement, investigation, study, and/or recommendation, or designated as future agenda items for board consideration. Are there any students who would like to address the board? All right. Are there any public members who would like to address the board?
Hi, Annie Cruz. I'd first like to thank the board for engaging with the book study, Why Meadow Died. I have read the book. I found it very intriguing, very interesting, and I'm looking forward to a nice dialogue, communication back and forth with the board and the school district on how we can make sure that we are all doing what's best for the students regarding all those policies. So I'm really excited for you guys to be engaging in this. Secondly, as a parent of 2 high school students, I'm pretty concerned about the information that I've been hearing from a variety of students and parents about what happened a few Fridays ago regarding a teacher in the high school, Mrs. Schlack. I don't really understand what happened, but I know she's not working at the school anymore. I haven't received any communication from the school or the superintendent about what happened, but I do know that I received an email yesterday or today from Michigan Virtual University indicating that my children were registered for an online class. I had no knowledge of what this class was, so I asked them, And they proceeded to tell me that because they had no teacher in this class, that they were being signed up to take another class. And I was just really taken aback by this because as a parent of 2 students, I would presume that if there were any class changes with my students, I would be informed by the school first. So I'm just looking to seek understanding of what happened, why this teacher's no longer there, what's going on with my students from that administrator side of things. So that would be helpful if you could clear that air for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Are there others?
Holly Blade. Just wanted to talk again about some of the comments that were made at the last meeting regarding the threats that were received by the board. I think a lot of us have come up here and made it very clear that we are not okay with that and we did not encourage it, and that we don't think it was appropriate for some of those messages to get through. But we also made it clear that we've also received them, and that's just part of our society, unfortunately, it seems at this point. But I was re-watching the meeting from the last one, and you know, with the board comments being at the end, it's kind of nice. You guys kind of get the last word on everything. But so I just wanted to address some of them. One of the board members made sure to address my comments, my suggestions that I told her I suggested to other people in my group of friends who received some horrible messages and comments and insults. And I had mentioned to them that if they felt strongly about what they were doing, they should just put on their big girl pants and keep going. And the board member, Heike, made a comment that she did put her big girl pants on. She showed up to the meeting and continued to discuss and let the community know what was going on behind the scenes. I would just beg to differ. I went back and watched the comments that you made at the meeting prior. That's not actually what happened. What happened was you showed up and you made it very clear to the community that you blamed parents such as me and others who come here with our concerns for the messages that were received by the board members that were negative or threatening or insulting. That's not what was intended when I said put on your big girl pants. What we do when we receive those messages is we just continue to show up and state facts and state our case and our concerns for the issues that matter. We have never once stood here and said that any of you are to blame for the messages that we've received, or that you should stop doing what you're doing so that we don't receive them. What was being done by some of the board members was, because of the threats and the insults received, the message that was being sent to us is that we should therefore be silent, and we should therefore stop bringing our concerns up. Because if we use certain words that you find offensive, you will term them as incitement of violence. But that is not what they are. It is grooming when you tell a child that it is okay for an adult to keep a secret from their parents. It may not be intentional, it may not be because they're a sexual predator, but it is considered grooming behavior. And it may be unintentional, and the person may not be aware of it, but it is grooming in the sense that it introduces the child to a concept that a sexual predator would be able to use to their advantage. So all I would say is that that is not what I meant by putting your big girl pants on. You don't get to use those insults that you received on email to silence me.
Thank you for your comment. Are there others? All right, thank you for those comments this evening. Next up on the agenda, I need a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of February 8th, 2023.
Moved by Farrow.
Support by Murray.
It's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of February 8th, 2023. Discussion. All right, it's It's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of February 8, 2023. Ms. Heika?
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Freight,
Abstain?
Heika, yes. Murray,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Next, I need a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting closed session of February 8, 2023.
Moved by Farrow.
Support by Rosenleacher.
It's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the closed session of February 8, 2023. Discussion. These are they're found in the folder. Hearing none, it's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the closed session of February 8, 2023. Ms. Heika?
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Freight,
Yes?
Heika, yes. Murray,
Yes.
motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. All right, next up in the area of academics and programs, I need a motion to approve the body safety curriculum created by the Washtenaw Area Council for Children and recommended by the Sex Education Advisory Board for use at Paddock Elementary School.
So moved.
Support by Farrow.
So moved and supported to approve the body safety curriculum created by the Washtenaw Area Council for Children and recommended by the Sex Education Advisory Board for use at Paddock Elementary School. This is our second reading of this. There's been open hearings. Mr. Gearbaugh?
Nothing really to add. As you said, we had the 2 public hearings that are required. The board has had 2 readings of the information. The letters that you have as attachments, B1, B2, and B3, lay out in great detail the material that's covered. The units are 2 weeks in length. Each week has 4 days of 20 minutes of material provided by experts from the Washtenaw Area Council for Children. So it was a unanimous vote of the SEAB to bring it to you, and we are excited to have you approve it so we can use it at the end of this school year.
And I do see Ms. Kunzel is in the audience. Thank you very much for being here and all your work on this and your committee. We greatly appreciate it. And I did attend the session last time, and it did appear to be a great curriculum for that. More discussion.
Mr. Sislo?
Yeah.
I was also at that second hearing, a public hearing, and I really appreciate it. I think it's a great curriculum. I do know that we were asked about support for special education students, and my understanding from that second public hearing is that the Washtenaw Area Council for Children are working on some of those pieces, but in the meantime, can we just ensure, Mr. Gearbaugh, that our special ed department has support to make sure that the needs of our special needs students are being met with this curriculum as well?
Yes, we will make sure that the TCs are present when the curriculum's being delivered and that they can accommodate that material appropriately for the students they have on their caseloads.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? All right, it's been moved and supported to approve the body safety curriculum created by the Washtenaw Area Council for Children and recommended by the Sex Education Advisory Board for use at Paddock Elementary School. Ms. Heika?
Sislo,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Freight,
Yes?
Heika, yes. Murray,
Yes.
Rosenleacher.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
All right, next up in the area of learning and environment of culture is the book study of Why Meadow Died. At the last meeting, we reviewed the 2 opening sections of the book, and we were going to read chapters 1 and 2 of the book for discussion this evening. Is there anyone that would like to start?
Mr. Sislo, I guess I'll start.
Yes.
This is obviously a very difficult topic and a very trying situation in schools all over the state when we think about the swatting that's been going on, what happened in our state a year ago, what happened last week at a college campus. And I appreciate the telling of the story from people who were present, but also having a lot more questions than answers. Obviously, you know, sticking to just our first 2 chapters, there's clearly a lot of things that we never learned when this incident occurred. So it's hard. It's hard. And I know that schools and administration and teachers are facing these really difficult tasks. I'm proud as a former educator, I guess lifelong educator, but former school administrator and teacher, that I know that things are very different here in the state of Michigan. And this is a good reminder to us that we continue to look at how we do things in our schools and in our state to ensure the safety of all. One of the things that's really resonated with me, particularly over the last week, is the question I keep asking is, how can we be sure? How can we be sure? How can we be sure? And we can lock everything down. We can not allow people in. But do we stop trying to live? I don't have the answer. I don't have the answer. But I know just even in these first 2 stories, hearing the story of the teacher and the story of the immigrant father, I've not lived that experience. So that's where I am in this moment.
Thank you, Ms. Rosenleacher. Others?
I'd say, excuse me, I'd say my take so far is it's unimaginable. You can feel the anger. People want answers. And there are certainly, they want answers. Like Betty indicated, they have lots of questions. A couple things that stuck out to me outside of the unimaginable loss was the Promise program within the school district. It was a new disciplinary program lowering suspensions, expulsions, and arrests. And it seems like the culture of leniency is of concern, and it was alarming. There were students that had shared stories about the shooter after the tragedy. They had apparently this individual had threatened to kill students. He brought knives and bullets to school. He brought dead animals to school and bragged about mutilating them. There were security concerns that were outlined in the book. For example, the high school didn't have a single point of entry. It was asserted that administrators did not actually enforce it. Students could come through a number of different entrances, and the day the shooter had simply walked through an open gate and an unlocked door. One of the things that bothers me as a parent reading this book was how bathrooms were locked in the building due to apparent student drug use, smoking, and vaping. And during the attack, students tried to get into those bathrooms, but they were locked. So that was truly stunning and very sad. The other thing that I got out of it was there was a parent that had a son that was shot in the school 5 times. And the shooter had committed crimes in school but was never arrested. And it was asserted in the book that everyone knew that Mr. Cruz was the shooter the moment that the shooting started. Also in the book was reference to a collaborative agreement between the Broward School District and the Sheriff's Office on how to handle crimes at school. Apparently, students got 3 misdemeanors a year before school administrators could talk to law enforcement. Another sad situation with the first few chapters was it talked about how the school resource officer refused to enter the building and actively prevented other officers from entering. The murderer, Mr. Cruz, had a building full of 800 students to himself for 11 minutes. So, yeah, as a parent, this is a very difficult read, and there are some takeaways, at least for me, and I'm looking forward to reading more, and hopefully some of these answers, some of the questions and some of the answers will be apparent in this read. So, thank you.
Yeah, just some background of the 2 chapters. The first chapter that we read was about a teacher that was at the school, and it was about the support that she was offered but never followed through with after the shooting. So that was one of the things in that first chapter that stuck out. So it was the story of this teacher. And then the second chapter, like has been mentioned, was about an immigrant father who had moved for a better life for his family and his son. And it focused a lot on this Promise program, which we've talked about, that people have talked about before. And I'm not aware of any type of program that we have like that with any of our prosecutors or police here in Milan. So, but again, regardless, that's the program that existed that allowed some of this to happen.
Andrew, I want to correct one thing you said, just because I think that I want to make sure, I think I understand what you meant, but I want to make sure the public does too. It wasn't help that was offered, but the teacher, did not follow up through. It was help that was offered by the district, but then it turned out not to be help at all.
Right.
I just want to make sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because I think that that's what struck me, was just the lack of support, and maybe because this was 5 years ago, maybe this happens now, and we'll unfortunately hear similar stories out of Oxford. And I know there's already been some discussion about whether or not Michigan State should have held classes today. But what struck me was just the lack of support for everyone who was in the building or in the community afterwards. It seems like there was a lot of attempts, but it all just kind of fell flat and wasn't really the type of help that people needed. And so I hope that, because we are 5 years past now and we are hearing these stories, that would be something that I think somewhere in here, I don't know, because I've read the whole book, and I can't remember if it's in these 2 chapters or later, one of the administrators is going to say to one of the teachers, well, there's not a playbook. And I know now that, we do have plans. I have a copy of our plan. And so I actually am going to go back and check to make sure that, is there support systems set up as part of our plan? Because I think that we can't be, no one should be making that up as they go. That's, I think, an important part to how to address these types of situations. I also was struck by this Promise program. I think that as school board members, and I know in conversations with administrators, it's always a hard balance, right? Like, particularly if you have a student, and I think that this particular student was, probably, well, not probably, he was way on the outer realm of everything. But particularly when you have students who are routinely disruptive, routinely, involved in bullying and things like that, how much time can they be out of school? Are you helping them when they're out of school? Are you really just feeding into the behavior when you keep them out of school? And so how do you, and we talk about these things, particularly in discipline hearings, how do we balance the needs this particular student clearly has, since they're exhibiting these behaviors, and our need and requirement to keep everyone else safe. What's the balance there? How do we do that? And clearly the Promise program didn't do that in retrospect. But what I do want to point out, though, is that in the book, the author talks about, and these are his words, the so-called schoolhouse to jailhouse pipeline. And I was really struck by that because it's not a so-called schoolhouse to jailhouse pipeline. It exists. And there's study after study that demonstrates that it happens. And once students get into this pipeline, it's very difficult for them and their families to get out of the pipeline. In fact, there was just an article on the Free Press the other day about students in the juvenile courts, and just the amount, this one was particularly focused on fines that parents have to pay and how that can help exacerbate the problems that students and families are already facing once they get into the system. But there are a lot of studies out there that demonstrate that this pipeline does exist, and that there are studies that demonstrate that particularly boys of color can be exhibiting the exact same behaviors as their white counterparts, and that exact same behavior is viewed very differently than when it is exhibited by their white counterparts. I mean, there are studies, you can Google them, they're out there. So I understand where they're coming from here, and that the Promise program was an extreme version of how do you find that balance. But these are real issues that we're grappling with in all of the schools, and how do we balance that? How do we make sure that we're educating everyone and keeping everyone safe at the same time?
Thank you, Ms. Heike. Others?
Not quite ready yet. You want to go? I'm not quite ready yet. You can go ahead if you want. I need a minute.
I guess my takeaway builds off everybody's. I don't think I have anything really new or anything. I think we touched on the lack of the support, and I think we've talked about that a lot with COVID, the different supports that we've had and how we've hired new people, the behavioral science, our specialists, and more our school psychologists, or looking or hoping to have school psychologists and do more for our kids for the COVID situation. And then you go back and to me, I was reading that and you see that they desperately needed it then. And the first thing that always happens is they want the counseling and the support to be around, and then you wonder how effective is that, you know? For better or for worse, years of being in, the kids have something to say, and when you're in there, the thick of it, and you listen to what they have to say, it is interesting to know what they think is effective and isn't. So when I was reading what the teacher said about, she assumed the support would come, and it just really wasn't available, and then what they had support wasn't helpful in a way, and in particular the one that did go to the counseling, and then the counselor himself, there's a quote in there, he almost got violently ill when they tried to explain, so they couldn't really comprehend what had happened. Because you don't walk in everybody's footsteps. You don't always know what they happened, and you hope you never have to go through this. So how would you know how to cope with some of that? So I think right now we face a tremendous deficit of knowing what to do and how to provide that support in a whole gamut of areas on COVID, aftermath, beforehand. I also am a big, firm believer in knowing our kids. Everybody, our students, there's, in the book, it says that the students knew who it was ahead of time and stuff, and a lot of times, some teachers can give you some insight on that as well. And we're a small enough district, I think we've said that a lot, that we're fortunate that we do know our staff and our students. And Mrs. Kenzel, you're famous for the safe person, right? And knowing that it's not just a staff member. You're always like, you give them options. So then, and we often ask them, do you have a safe person? With no limitation as to who that person was, but just that you have somebody. And that can be the support that you're looking for and hopefully have. And I think that's an invaluable thing to know our kids, and it's a bit of comfort. It might be misleading to think that we are small enough to know that we know our kids and can look at behaviors and kind of get something out of that. The other thing I got was when she reached out to her administrator and thanked him for the drill that they did so that she knew what to do, and that was the reason that she was able to stay in her room. And if I'm not mistaken,
Was
Brian,
her previous administrator?
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, Brian, didn't years ago, we did that here, didn't we? We had.
Kristen, why don't you explain what the drill was?
Oh,
so
okay.
that
Well, when we do the Alice training, that was, gosh, I don't even know what Alice alert, but it's the training for when we do the lockdowns. And Brian, it was years ago, but I believe you go through the scenarios. And I just recently, for those who don't know, I am a full-time sub at Airport High School. So I go into Airport High School and I get all the training, and I did Alice training this fall. And instead of just doing the scenarios on the computer where you go through and it's kind of a PowerPoint and everything, they actually had our school resource officers break us into different scenarios, and then we had to react. And so we spent over 3 hours going into different scenarios, and then they came in with like a Nerf gun and did the noises and stuff so that you instantly had more of a reality of what that would really be like versus it's a lockdown drill and you're trying to deal with the kids knowing it's a drill, so the seriousness of the situation isn't always there. And this was all just staff, but the sounds, the fear, the atmosphere is very much real, even though the threat is not. So your reactions and what you have to do and what you think to do to barricade your room and to make yourself safe, and then to have somebody come in with Nerf balls and count up all the people that actually got hurt, it gets your reality really, really quick. And the teacher in this book that wrote chapter 1 had a previous administrator do that drill for them. Then they had gone through that. And that is what saved her in her classroom, because she was aware of the reality when it happened. And it made her more conscious of, this is what we're going to do versus that. And I know from my own experience, when I went through that training, we thought we had this bulletproof a way to not open the door, and we were so proud of ourselves, and our school resource officer got in that door in seconds. And it was so deflating to think that we had thought that process through so well, and it didn't work worth a darn. And it hits you really, really hard. And then to turn around and have the resource officer tell us that when they had done this drill in different places, one of the most effective ways that worked, and it works with carpet better, is to put the doorstop in the reverse and there's no way they can get in. Something so simple as the doorstop. And so we were planning this great big, debacle of what to do, and we had it all taped up and roped off, and we're so proud of ourselves. So it was interesting to me to think that, and to know, and I know, Mr. Gerbal, you put a lot of effort into making sure all of our new teachers are Alice trained, and I think it's been a few years since we've actually done the real drill, but it is incredibly beneficial to go through that and know how you would react, because it's a very different atmosphere when you're in a drill, and those of you that know, your kids react differently when they know it's a drill. Unfortunately, some take it serious and some don't, and so when it's always just a drill, and we've been drilling and drilling and drilling, and state mandate tells us how many drills we have to do, there's sometimes some lack of seriousness, some lack of real understanding that this needs to save your life. Those of you that know that Stephanie Moore, she used to be a teacher at Simons, she since left for different opportunities, and she was in a Virginia mall when there was a shooting, and due to her Alice training as an educator, she knew what to do with her two small children. Now, it didn't prevent any of her fear and everything else, but it instantly kicked in and gave her that training and that ability to know how to handle that situation. So hopefully, we can instill that in our kids to know that, yes, this is a drill, and hopefully you never ever have to use it, but in the event that you do, and it kind of kicks in and it helps. When I go through and I think about chapter 2 with the father and everything that he went to sacrifice for his son, it's shattering to think that one son's got a medical issue and now he's got to turn around and have all the issues with his son being shot, and what they're able to overcome. It's crazy. The hardest part, I think, and this I think what Tom and all of us have alluded to, is everybody has questions and you desperately want answers. The sad fact is we're not going to always have those answers. There's a million ways to get in. We can have a 1-point entry, but there's just a million, there's so many other things that are going to happen. I think the very, very best we can do is be aware and try and work together and communicate as much as we can. And much like I said last time, I really hope that their hindsight can be our foresight, so that we can try to work together to make sure that we do instill in the kids how incredibly important this is. Yes, it's a drill, but it will serve you well in life, much like math and reading and writing, and that we open that up to know that we're not going to have answers sometimes, and it's going to hurt, and it's going to cause some anger, and it's going to cause some confusion, but we're open to try to work towards a resolution. We might not ever get an answer, but to work towards getting somewhere to make it somewhat better, to make it, to do something so that we're not just blindly sitting there doing nothing, which is the whole point of Alice now. Before, it was sit in a room and do, and now there's all these choices. Get out, do this, do that, figure out what you need to do. So we've come a long way, and we obviously have some room to continue to go, and I'm just hopeful that we gain some more foresight from their hindsight.
Thank you, Ms. Wright.
And Mr. Sislo?
Yeah, Ms. Murray.
Okay. I don't know. I think it's working right now, but it's been in and out. So apologies if the microphone doesn't stick with me. I'll try to keep it brief and not repeat. But I did want to thank Board Member Heike for the, I continue to take some significant issue with any time that the school to jail pipeline is put in quotations or called so-called. The research is for sure out there, but I am in agreement that promise, from what I've read so far, does seem to be perhaps an overcorrection, sitting a little bit too far in one direction, and it is just so difficult as a school system to balance the needs of the many and the needs of the one. It's a delicate, juggling act that every school district has to contend with at one time or another. The author raises a couple of examples, like he writes, the penalty for drug use decreased from a lengthy stint in an alternative school and threat of expulsion to 3 days at an alternative school. And before promise, the serious consequence for drug use helped get kids back on track. There are no footnotes. There is no reference to a study in the back. I looked, and I would argue that that's probably not supported well by data. From what I know as an educator, zero tolerance policies aren't effective for things like bullying and school-based offenses. And so we are in this national tug of war, trying to find that middle space where we work to support students when they make mistakes because they are not yet adults, they're children, and then yet also preserving the safety of all of the other students that we are required to serve. And we have to remember too that every single student has rights. Regardless of what may happen with their behavior at school, they have rights. And so I feel at times that the author loses sight of that, that as much as we can't imagine the actions of Cruz or students, perpetrators like him, every individual in our justice system has rights, and they have to be observed. I also wanted to lift a couple of things that the teacher in Chapter 2 had brought up, because I really resonated with some of the things that she was saying. For those of you that don't know my teaching history, I started out teaching in the South in a school that served predominantly black and brown students of color and speaking many different languages. And so that's partly why the dismissal of the school to prison pipeline bothers me so much, because I have seen it in operation for nearly a decade of my career. It's hard to ignore when that's your student population that you're working with, and seeing the impact in the community firsthand. But that being said, teaching in the South was different. It still is different. The part where the teacher talks about, feeling disempowered to handle student behavior, that happened to me when I was teaching in the South too. That is a thing that I would have changed about our school system where I was teaching at that time. And so in trying to look at this through a Milan lens, did I feel like I was disempowered teaching here? Absolutely not. Quite the opposite. I felt very empowered as a teacher here to address student behavior and work in collaboration with my administrators and my co-teachers on my team. And so that, I think, is a juxtaposition between Kim's experience in this book and her experience in the South. And what it's like here right now in our community. And there's another point too later on where they write about schools being no-go zones for law enforcement, as though like the law and the school exist as completely separate entities and there's no overlap. And so again, looking at that through a Milan lens, that's not our reality here. Our school system is extremely well connected with our area law enforcement, and we work in constant and close partnership. And so I found that to be heartening and just a way to check ourselves, against this book as a litmus test, right? Does this exist here? And in those particular cases, I don't believe that is our situation. And I think that's where I'll leave it for these chapters. So, thanks, Mr. Sisler.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all. Any other comments regarding the book? All right, we will read the next 2 chapters for the next meeting and discuss it at the next meeting. Next up on the agenda, communications and community engagement, we have a WISD PAC update from Ms. Andrea Bennick. Ms. Bennick.
Good evening. Thank you. For those of you in the community who may not know me, my name is Andrea Bennick, and I am the Milan Area Schools representative for the Washtenaw Intermediate School District Parent Advisory Committee and the elected chairperson for that committee. Thank you to the Board of Education for the opportunity to give an update on the work of the PAC this evening. I'll begin tonight's update with an exciting development in the WISD. High Point School has a dedicated autism spectrum disorder wing, and they have recently been able to hire staff to open a classroom for elementary-aged students there. This wing is designed and set up specifically for students living with autism. Having hired staff to begin utilizing that space will help to maximize the educational experience and outcomes for those students. During the discussion on High Point's new class, the PAC inquired about the process for how students are enrolled and accepted into High Point School. We've learned that the process begins in the local school district with a special education director or IEP team making a recommendation for students to receive services through High Point. It's based on their need for free, appropriate public education and services that the student's home district is able to provide. That recommendation then leads to observation of the student and data collection, learning what needs and services the student has, and then the IEP team, which includes family input, works to determine if placement at High Point is the best course of action. It follows the principles of individualized education and least restrictive environment. The PAC also asked for a presentation from High Point staff to learn and understand more fully about that process. Once our representatives have a more complete understanding of the process for placement outside of a student's home district, then we can relay that information to families who may inquire about the process or inquire if High Point might be a better fit for their child. The PAC also heard an update from the WISD in regards to planning for the extended school year for the summer of 2023. IEPs for each student have a section that denotes whether a student qualifies for ESY or not. That discussion should take place with each family during IEP meetings. Data collection on learning loss over school breaks plays a part in determining eligibility for ESY. The goal of extended school year is to retain the growth that took place during the previous academic year, preventing learning loss that can be difficult for students with special needs to recover. The PAC then took time to hear from each district representative about how they're connecting with their boards, their administrators, and their families. A representative from Chelsea shared a flyer that she created outlining the mission and role of PAC. And I've made a similar flyer, which I've shared with you and have distributed to building admins to share with their TCs and their families who have children that receive special education services. This flyer has my contact information on it, and I encourage anyone within the district who has questions or concerns or needs support to reach out to me. And I strive to work with families in our district and help get them the information that they need for their children. This is going to be lengthy because we have 2 months worth of meetings, sorry.
Absolutely, no, that's fine, we understand.
The WISD also shared the timeline that is laid out for updating, revising, and submitting their delivery of special education services plan. This plan helps to outline for districts how special education services are provided, breaking down funding, strategies for identifying students with suspected disabilities, support staff qualifications, the role of PAC within the WISD and districts, and more. This plan is updated, revised, and resubmitted to the Department of Education every 5 years. 2023 happens to be the year for updating that plan. With that in mind, the PAC is committed to better understanding the services plan as it is outlined that the plan and amendments shall be developed in cooperation with the PAC, the local school districts, and the public school academies. We recognize that much of the updating and revising falls to the special education directors and the WISD staff, and we want to be diligent in our understanding and providing recommendations to the WISD with a parent perspective in mind. We will be utilizing the bulk of our remaining meetings to focus on that task. The draft of the services plan will be presented to the PAC in March, and any amendments and revisions will be addressed in April, and finalization and submission of that plan will happen in May or June. Representatives also spent some time discussing what types of trainings take place in their districts, particularly for their support staff, namely paraprofessionals. We heard from the Dexter representatives that paras receive behavioral intervention training. It was noted in our minutes that the Team TA Toolbox series is used within that district. Another PAC member mentioned START behavioral training modules that have been used in the past to provide support for paras in the WISD. The PAC continued discussion on support for paraprofessional trainings at this month's meeting. We heard from Celine's staff that they offer extensive training, it sounds like, on professional development days. They even utilize their occupational therapists to train paraprofessionals in sensory accommodations. And that was very interesting and a concept that we would like to see explored in more districts for several reasons. Having support staff train paras can foster a sense of teamwork, and it also allows training to come from staff who are already familiar with the district protocols and available supports, and they can explain practical ways to implement accommodations. PAC representatives from all districts agree that parents and paraeducators desire advanced quality training to help improve educational outcomes and empower paraeducators to more adequately support their students. Along those lines, we explored the possibility of recommending that the WISD service plan include language advising additional training for support staff, specifically paraprofessionals, beyond the state and federal minimum required trainings. In conversation with Sherry Van Adder and Deborah Hester Washington, we've learned that the WISD plan outlines qualifications for hiring professionals, but doesn't inform the districts on what trainings they are mandated to put in place once staff has been hired. Based on that information, PAC is considering recommending that the WISD adopt a resolution or addendum to the service delivery plan that encourages districts to provide training above and beyond the state and federal minimum trainings. Fortunately, there are some wonderful training opportunities that the WISD is putting on this summer for support staff. It's my understanding that the WISD will be holding 3 separate sessions of a para boot camp, which will be a week-long intensive training for paraprofessionals. It will be a paid training with meals provided. The WISD will be sharing details of that opportunity as soon as they're locked in. PAC representatives are encouraging support staff in our districts to be on the lookout for details and to register as soon as possible to take advantage of this training. The WISD will also continue to provide training opportunities as they have in the past, including crisis prevention training. In Milan, Lon Smith trains our paraprofessionals in nonviolent crisis intervention. The PAC also touched on the need for all districts to have a peer-to-peer program in place, especially at the middle school and high school levels. The Grand Valley State University website outlines how to develop, implement, and maintain a peer program through their START resource, which is a training module to support families living with ASD, which is autism spectrum disorder. This is another topic the PAC will continue to discuss in future meetings with the hopes of seeing all districts within the WISD implement a successful peer-to-peer program. In February's meeting, we learned that there are specific grants available to start and grow peer-to-peer programs. Milan has a leadership class available at the high school level, and Lon Smith is working with the middle school staff to restart the peer-to-peer program in that building. At February's meeting, the PAC representatives were encouraged to reflect on how parents, as a group, are meaningfully involved in the shaping of special education within their districts. If more support is needed in this area, representatives could work with families and the district administrators to help foster connections. This could look like starting a support group, creating social media pages to share resources, connecting families to the proper staff, etc. By working together to gain a fuller understanding of the variety of perspectives that are involved in special education, we can strengthen our programs and work to provide beneficial improvements to our districts with regards to serving our special needs populations. This PAC meeting also briefly discussed the necessary skill sets that should be developed when charged with meeting in a group and representing their districts and families. These include listening to different perspectives and asking questions to gain clarification on those perspectives, withholding judgment and action until all facts are known, and making sure that parents with concerns are referred to the appropriate administrators within their districts. PAC members were advised to learn their district's chain of command to be able to helpfully guide parents. And I know, Brian, that you've spoke on that before as well. PAC members were also encouraged to take advantage of leadership training opportunities like the Parents Partnering for Change, and I've spoke of that before, and the quality training that it provides. Finally, the PAC seeks to share resources with the families in our districts. One way we're doing that is periodically creating a backpack flyer that highlights supports for families, educational resources, and extracurricular activities specifically designed for students with special needs. While this flyer only touches on some of the offerings available in our area, it's a great starting point for families who may be looking for activities or may need some resources for their own educational journey. The past flyer I handed out highlighted a Facebook page that shares events and activities specific to the disabled community. It highlights a new nonprofit that took over the Work and Play Cafe, creating a special needs resource center. The Michigan Alliance for Families, which has excellent trainings and webinars for free. The Special Education Mediation Services, which provides support for navigating the educational process. Some Special Olympics groups in Saline. Sensory-friendly movie offerings, adaptive soccer programs, summer camps and young adult programs, and a winter camp that's available for families who have members who are deaf or hard of hearing. Our goal in sharing these resources in a backpack flyer is to help get this information to families. Sometimes the world of special needs resources can be hard to navigate and overwhelming. PAC is working to lessen that overwhelm by sharing resources and making them easier to access for our families who have students with special needs. We also welcome the public to our PAC meetings. There's a flyer available to post at the schools and share with staff and families that highlights the date, time, location, and topics of upcoming meetings. There's time at every meeting for families to concisely share their experiences if they desire. PAC meetings are a great way to begin building community with other families in the special education world and to learn about some of the ins and outs of special education. I thank you for this time this evening. This update allows for PAC to work towards creating that connection with the families in our districts, our boards of education, and the WISD. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Did I understand, you said you're the chairperson of the?
I am.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks. It was kind of a surprise.
Kind of surprise. Any questions for Mrs. Bennick?
Remind me
thank
again,
you.
when are the meetings? Because it's a regularly scheduled meeting, correct?
It is correct. They are on the third Tuesday of every month during the school year, and they are from 6:30 until 8 o'clock. I actually have a flyer that I would like to share with Mr. Gearbaugh that he can print off and post on our buildings, same as the other. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Do you just want to email that to me?
Yeah, I can email that to you.
That'd be
That's fine.
perfect.
Any other questions?
Third Tuesday, 6:30 to 8?
Yes.
Perfect. At
Great.
the ISD, correct?
Yes, they are at the TLC Center, which is Teaching and Learning Center at the WISD, and that's on Wagner Road.
Excellent. So our families know where to find you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Next up on the agenda is public comments. Again, a reminder that this meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public meeting. There are 2 times for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. When addressing the board, you'll be asked to state your name. The board determines the amount of time granted to individuals or groups to speak. Each person shall be allowed to speak up for up to 3 minutes, and I'll ask you to finish your thought when the timer goes off. Board members may question speakers but are not obligated to answer questions or make statements or commitments in response to issues raised by the public. In general, such items will be referred to the superintendent for advisement, investigation, study, and/or recommendation, or designated as future agenda items for board consideration. Are there any students who would like to address the board? Other public members who'd like to address the board?
Annie Cruz. I'm not quite sure when is a good opportunity to comment about the Why Meadow Died book, but it was good to hear your comments on the first couple of chapters. And I wanted to speak to some comments that Ms. Murray made. I'm really happy to hear that you did not feel overwhelmed in your classroom and you were able to, you know, work in a collaborative setting to help the students. But I have to tell you that is not every teacher's experience. I know that because I'm a parent of kids that sit in some classrooms, especially in the high school, that do not have support, that are berated, are disrespected by students. My students sit there in awe and are dumbfounded as to the lack of collaborative support that the teacher has to control these kids. And they know that they wouldn't be able to get away with that. It creates an environment in the classroom that is not educationally sound. And these teachers get into, not combative, but it's almost like they're bullied by these students. And I hear that these teachers try to get support from the district, but I'm not quite sure what happens. And again, I'm hearing this firsthand and secondhand, so I know where that leads down to, but I hope that through this book, the board and the district can look at their own policies and really truly evaluate what is beneficial for these students. We know that these policies, and I'm not going to get the term right, but I think they're surrounding some social justice policies, and they have to also relate to Common Core when that came down a decade or so ago, that how we deal with students' behavior has changed. And I don't really think it's a lot of it's not positive. Some of it is positive, absolutely, but a lot of it is not, and it's just equip these kids to almost control the classroom in a very disrespectful manner. And when the teachers aren't feeling safe enough to deal with a disrespectful student, and then they come back a couple hours later or an hour later, and it's not something, they're not treated like they used to be treated, where if you're disrespectful, you're out. So they have that consequence. They understand that if they cross this line, you know, they can't come back until they realize what their behavior is doing and they can fix it. The other thing is when you take a student out of the classroom to deal with them and the teacher leaves too, that leaves that classroom to gossip and come up with all kinds of other scenarios instead of leaving that child and that teacher in the classroom to discuss what just happened and make it an educational learning environment. And then that student gets bullied further down the road. So I just hope that whether the community involvement, the teacher, the policies, we can all look at these things and hopefully come up with a better solution to some of these behaviors so that this disrespect doesn't necessarily continue and cause teachers to feel disillusioned and not supported. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you for your comment, Ms. Cruz. Are there others?
I just wanted to mention that I know I'd emailed Mr. Sislo about this. Moving public comment to this meeting to before the closed session and before the discussion and the vote on the book appeals is really frustrating to me. I mean, you chose, actually, during one meeting, you chose in the middle of the meeting to vote to move just public comment to after closed session, and that was a time when you knew it was going to be extremely lengthy, and you had several disciplinary hearings, which I believe lasted till 2 or 3 a.m. Then you chose to do it again for the next meeting, and you chose to move public comment and all the comments to after closed session. So for this one, for you to choose to move public comment to before closed session, where you don't anticipate, I would assume, it going till 3 a.m., is very frustrating, especially when you did it for a meeting that was addressing such an important issue facing the district right now, which is the book challenge appeals. You know, I have my theories as to why, but either way, I'm just expressing to you that I find it very frustrating, and there's a lot of people in the community who do as well, so we would appreciate some consistency with the way that you guys handle your agendas. So continuing my response to the board member Heike's past statement, she had mentioned she won't stop fighting for marginalized students. Which is why she's pushing for these books to stay. You know, that statement, again, which has happened many times, is implying that those of us who want these books removed do not care for marginalized students, and that is not accurate. She said she was very open with the community on where she stood on these issues, and she's not going to stop fighting for these values. The problem is, I've gone back, I've read through your campaign posts, I've watched the forum, I've watched all these other interviews. Nowhere did I find any time where you expressed to the voters in this community your ardent support for providing explicit pornographic vulgar materials to students. I'm not sure we knew that that's what we were signing up for. I've talked to a lot of people over the last 2 or 3 months about these books. I've read them, I've shown them to people, and I've sent them out. And I will tell you that it is overwhelmingly the majority from both political parties that the majority of the people in this community are against these books being available to students. They are shocked and sickened. Marginalized students, that's why you're fighting so hard for these books. Which of these students will be harmed by not being able to access the graphic novel of A Handmaid's Tale with images of women being held down on a bed and raped, or naked women with guns in their mouths? Is that really the best way for you to fight for those students? If you were to ask, would this be the issue that they would urge you to champion? These kids you claim to care so much about, what are you doing about the bullying that's taking place in their schools? What about the plummeting test scores and having a hard time getting into colleges and scholarships? What about the lack of tutoring services? What are you doing about the kids that are not reading at grade level and just getting pushed along? What about the special needs kids whose IEPs aren't being followed and aren't getting the para support they deserve because the paras are quitting because of the environment inside the classroom? What about the kids getting free lunch who don't have time to both wait in line and eat, an issue that was brought up to you by George Elder months ago? What about those marginalized students? Are you fighting as hard for them as you are for these books? Yes, the books in the library, like the one about a pedophile removing his genitals from the dry cavern of a child's vagina. Not sure that's on the top of any kid's list of concerns right now. It is not brave for you to stand there in your position of authority with your microphone, your unrestricted comment time, and your gavels, and say to us all of these things that you want to disparage us for. What is brave are all of the several people in our community who are actual survivors of sexual assault, who have chosen some for the very first time to stand at this microphone and share your stories, most times on the verge of tears, of what they've gone through, and they've expressed to you how harmful it would be for them at a young age to be exposed to some of these books. They themselves have said this to you. They've told you that what they do need is trained counseling and protection and support, and many of them have told you these books would have actually caused them more trauma. But none of you responded. Not one of you acknowledged anything that they said about their courage or the pain that they expressed, except for one. One person commented, and that only one response was from our superintendent, Brian Gearbaugh, who chose to follow up a story,
Your time
but
has
just to
expired.
clarify, that situation
Thank you for your
didn't happen
comment.
at Milan.
Are there others? Next up is student board member comments. Ms. Farrell.
We would like to recognize the girls basketball team for their win on their senior night, the boys and girls varsity bowling team for their success this past week, and congrats to all the teams that participated in the Champions Night at yesterday's boys varsity basketball game. And an upcoming event this week is a girls JV and varsity basketball game tomorrow at Brandon Deerfield High School at 5:30 and 7 p.m.
Thank you, Ms. Farrell. Superintendent comments. Mr. Gearbaugh.
Just a few things to discuss. First, February is Career Technical Education Month, and I want to personally congratulate all of our students who are enrolled in Career Tech Ed courses at the South and West Washtenaw Consortium and through other partners that the district has in place. If any students do want a copy of the resolution that was read tonight, they will be available in the central office. Some staff updates. Colin Lambers, a teacher at Paddock Elementary School, lost his father. I myself lost my father in the last month as well. There was a public comment on a staff issue. We did have a staff issue occur at the high school. It's being addressed according to the policies and laws that we have to follow. There is a substitute in the classroom now. In order to make sure that the curriculum is continued in an effective way, we are purchasing an online curriculum through Michigan Virtual University for those students, but the substitute will be working with those students and teaching them the material using the curriculum from MVU as a basis. Milan Area Schools recently signed a contract with Secure Educational Consultants. This contract will provide the district with support in implementing the safety improvements identified during the recent safety assessment. While none of the findings represented major safety concerns, there are always areas for improvement. The assessment report concluded with the following statement. SCC believes that Milan Area Schools has done a remarkable job in developing and executing extremely comprehensive safety and security plans, and it currently provides very safe and secure environments for its staff and students. I know that there have been some ongoing questions about securing doors during lockdown situations. Locking a door is one way to secure the door during a lockdown issue. However, if a door cannot be locked for some reason, there are other alternatives that should be implemented. Some alternatives include moving to a neighboring room that can be locked quickly at the beginning of an incident, barricading the door, or using an alternative door securing device. The district recently did equip each of the common spaces at Milan High School that are used by paraprofessionals with door securing devices. As required by law, the district recently placed the annual education reports, or AERs, on the district websites. The district and other individual buildings have cover letters and reports. These documents can be found under the Our District or Our School tab on each of the main web pages. Simply navigate to the Reports section on the drop-down menu for that tab. Governor Whitmer recently released her budget recommendations, including the school aid budget. The Senate and House will soon be providing their responses, and the budget development process will begin. We hope that the state will provide us with a budget prior to our required preliminary budget deadline of June 30th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerbo. Assistant Superintendent comments, Mr. McMahon.
Yep, thank you. I have a couple. One's the grant update for this meeting. Our application for the Section 104 benchmark assessment grant was approved, and that essentially covers funding for NWA assessments. We've received that, I don't know, 6 or so years in a row, so we're happy to have that in place. I would also update the board that our MSTEP preparations are underway. Our pre-identification process was completed by Friday last week in each of the 3 buildings, and our teachers have, and the coordinators have conducted all the required trainings, so we're up to speed there. And I also want to offer recognition to Mrs. Kunzel in the audience today for her work leading the SEEB committee. It is a lot of extra work, and particularly when we're trying to get new materials approved, there's a lot of moving pieces to that, and so we appreciate all the extra work she does for our community. It's good and important work, and the public input piece is valuable, and she coordinates all that really well, so thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. McMahon. Next up is board member comments.
Mr. Sislo?
Yes, Ms. Rosenleacher.
I would like to thank Milan Main Street for taking the lead and supporting our own Milan alumni who currently attend MSU. I know that they've gotten notification that we have at least 25 students that are on campus this year.
Remind and invite the community to come hang out this Saturday for the downtown read around. Myself and Ms. Macchio will be out in the community from 11 a.m. to noon, just trying to catch some folks reading and enjoying our beautiful downtown, and just want to thank all of the area businesses too for participating and brightening up the windows. I'm looking forward to being out there, so hope to see some of you there too. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Murray.
Mr. Sissel?
Yes, Ms. Ray.
I'm going to need help with the name, Betty. I sent some emails, but I just wanted to update with some information as far as the WSB advocacy training. We are going to have it on March 9th. That is the correct date. And at 7 p.m. Brian, I think you had asked about the timing at the WISD. Is it Kurta? Matt Kurta?
Yes.
Is that how you say the pronunciation? Okay, so they've, just to read it to you, they've got advocacy training at the WISD with Matt Kurta from Kurab Association, and he'll be able to be there and talk us through different things. And like I mentioned before with WISB, the hope is to just have our districts come together and have a more powerful voice with our legislators with the change of things in Lansing. So really kind of hoping if you guys are able to get there, that'd be great. I think there's also going to be a Zoom. I will let you know for sure. So if you aren't physically able to be there, that you can maybe Zoom in as far as that goes. We're also still desperate for anybody that wants to be on that nomination slate. It's just something policy dictates, and so they have to have, there's only supposed to be 3 people, so we're not actually like trying to get one from every district. We have one person that said, yay, I do it. So we really only need 2. And all you're really going to be asked to do is like, here's the slate. It's pretty much going to be the same people. We might be moved around in different positions. And then you just get to officially say, this is the slate we're bringing for everyone to vote on. And then once we have that, I'll bring it back to you as our representative and ask you for your vote, because, I mean, I'm on there, but if somebody wants to vote, as to who you're voting for and what position.
Okay.
But our policies, it's pretty strict about having to have this nomination slate approved by somebody, then come back with you with the slate, then come back and vote. So, and all that needs to be done, I believe, before our March actual meeting, so you might be getting bugged by people. So my apologies, we're just kind of desperate for 2 more people on that one. I too would like to congratulate, thank you, Maya, for all of our big rets and their sports. I really appreciate all the effort that Mr. Hull puts in on adding all the advertisements on Facebook, because it's really nice to share those and see all of the successes of our students. Andrea, thank you very much for doing everything you do with PAC. It's really easy to overlook some of our special needs, and it's nice to know that you give us so much time and so much energy, and I really appreciate your efforts. So I thank you. And that's it for me. Thank you, Andrew.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Freight. Mr. Farrell?
Okay. Just a few things. I know that Brian mentioned the state budget. So the state's new fiscal budget will be October 1st. It begins on October 1st. Assuming that Governor Whitmer's proposed budget is adopted in June, that would include a $485 per pupil increase to raise the foundation allowance to $96.08. So, as Brian said, hopefully the budget can be adopted at the time that we need to adopt our budget. Another just brief comment, I informed Andrew that I'm not able to attend the MASB Winter Institute. I'm not able to participate as I have a work commitment. With regard to the Winter Institute, the district did not pay or did not register or pay for any of the sessions on my behalf. Finally, I want to just briefly comment on the library book challenges. The lots of people or the lots in the community that have concerns about the library books, there's a defined process within our school district to address library book challenges. Board Policy 9130 is very clear on how the process works. Community members and other stakeholders are entitled to use their public time as they so choose. However, utilizing public comment time to read excerpts of library books one might find objectionable, in my view, does not change or modify the process that's specifically described in our board policy, 9130. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell. Ms. Heiko?
Mr. Gearbaugh, I
was wondering if you could look into the summer para-pro training that Mrs. Bennick reported on earlier. And I'm not sure if I thought she said it was paid and there was lunch provided, but I wonder if you could look into, and I know this may take some discussion with the union if the rest of the board is interested in doing something like this, but perhaps we could incentivize some of our para-pros to attend that training this summer.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think that there's a lot been said tonight about how I put on my big girl panties and how other people put theirs on. I'm going to continue to put mine on the way I do, and you can continue to put yours on the way you do, and we'll go down our path that we're going down, and I think that that's fine. While I agree that there was no discussion during the campaign about these books, I still made it very clear how I feel about and the importance to me of marginalized communities, and I do think that I've lived up to my campaign promises, and I have also lived up to all of my other promises related to all other students. I'd like to address, though, this idea that we have these plummeting test scores, because we just got some information as board members about some of our test scores, and our winter kindergarten math scores were up 7 points. The winter kindergarten reading scores were up 10 points. First grade math was up 9 points. First grade reading was up 10 points. Second grade reading was up 7 points. Math was up 7 points. Similarly, when you look at third through fifth grade, those reading scores are up anywhere between 4 and 9 points, and the math scores were up between 5 and 10 points. When we look at our middle school, when we again look at our these are all NWEA tests, by the way, our reading scores were up anywhere at the middle school between 1 point and 8 points, and the math scores were up between 2 points and 6 points. So our test scores are, in fact, on the rise, thanks to our incredible staff and administration and all the hard work that our students are putting in every day here and the great things that are happening here in Milan. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Heika. Just a reminder that we are seeking applications for a vacant position on the Board of Education. The individual will be appointed by the board to fill this vacant position through December 31st, 2024, and will be replaced on January 1st, 2025 by an individual elected to the position during the November 2024 election. If you're interested, please submit an application to the district office, which is 100 Big Red Drive, Milan, Michigan, 48160, no later than 4 p.m. on Friday, March 3rd, 2023. Following a review of these applications, the board will schedule interviews with the applicants. These are going to be in-person interviews, and we hope to have them during the regularly scheduled board meeting at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023. So those interviews will be in open session to appoint that board position.
Mr. Sitzler?
Yeah, Ms. Freight.
My apologies.
Sure.
I forgot because I will not be able to attend. I'm currently on a sub job, but we have a legislative coffee coming up on February 27th. It's Monday at 7:30. There will be food for those of you that want to come in person. And they're trying to do a more different approach with the legislators that will be there, and more of a kind of get to know you and talk to you and more interactive, if you will. So it's not going to be the typical sit at the tables and kind of look at each other and have someone talk at you. There's a hope to have more introductions and be more personable and get to know one another instead of, and then trying to have the advocacy training to come at and get to know them first, and then come with the advocacy training and do kind of a more professional approach to try to have that strong voice. So this particular coffee is a very different dynamic than all the other legislative breakfasts that we've had. Back to having food again, number one, and number two, more interaction. So it's not going to be as sterile, if you will. And that is Monday, the 27th at 7:30 up at the ISD. So, and I will not be there. My apologies. But
Thank you, Ms. Freight.
I'm sorry about forgetting.
Any other comments? All right, next up, I need a motion to enter into closed session pursuant to Section 8(1)H of the Michigan Open Meetings Act and Section 13(1)G of the Freedom of Information Act for the purpose of reviewing attorney-client communication.
Moved by Heika.
Support by Farrow.
So moved and supported to enter into closed session pursuant to Section 81H of the Michigan Open Meetings Act and Section 13(1)G of the Freedom of Information Act for the purpose of reviewing attorney-client communication. Just in regards to that, when we return, we will be taking action on the appeals to the board, the book challenges. That'll be the only orders of business after that meeting except for adjournment. So folks are welcome to stay. I'm not sure how long closed session will take, but you're definitely welcome to stay until closed session is over. Any other comments regarding this motion? All right, it's been moved and supported to enter into closed session pursuant to Section 81H of the Michigan Open Meetings Act and Section 13(1)G of the Freedom of Information Act for the purpose of reviewing attorney-client communication. Ms. Heika.
Farrow,
Yes.
Freight,
Yes?
Heike, yes. Murray,
Yes?
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
So we're going into closed session at 8:23.
But everyone has really good ideas. And
I'm drinking ice cold water.
Thank you for the wonderful update. And I have not heard anything about the Summer Miracle Institute, so I'm going to have to ask Sherry about it. They haven't announced it to the superintendent yet.
Oh,
So,
brand new news.
yeah, I will be asking about it for sure.
For sure, I'm really excited, and I appreciated Ms. Heike, talk about incentivization for communities. That was actually something I was hoping to meet with you and Mr. Smith about, to talk about possibility of
Well, and
that.
something we did this year too is when we have the PD days now for the teachers, when we switch the half days to full days,
Yes.
we're providing morning professional development for all the parapros in the district.
That's huge.
So
yes.
they're getting,
I know that Lon had talked to me a little
yeah,
bit
they're getting
about
four half days of PD.
Good.
So,
That's awesome.
and
Well,
a lot of times we ask them what topics they want to be trained in, and then provide that to them.
Really good.
Yep.
And then, is that like a mandatory training then? Is
It wasn't this year because of the schedule change,
Right.
but we've talked with the
Sorry,
union.
I'm not keeping you.
The union and membership, and we intend to make them mandatory next year. And provide childcare if they need it.
Yes, and
So-
that's wonderful to hear because that's really a big help.
Yeah, it was tough this year because we changed it.
was actually even thinking about actually calling him and just asking what that would be from probably in the library area. Because I guess it's just not just the library, but like if you would send it to the records. So I was actually just going to call them that because I know they have some program at school. So I know there's people there that have a relationship with some people. So I was like, there might be someone there to really good talk to. Because chances are, they probably be like everybody else, like, what do you mean Yeah, I think there is a lot of research though about
those are so bad we're going to leave.
So now you guys can come out of your closed session. You're probably listening to the live stream right now. That's probably why they left the mics on, because they're like, hey, leave the mics on so we can get our conference room and keep the YouTube live going, so they could listen to see if the room got quiet.
elementary.